Greek mythology. Quite possibly some of the oldest and most well-known tales and explanations of the world in existence. These are stories that have persisted to the modern day. And as the world became more and more globalized and as a result more connected, people started hearing about how roughly 85 to 90% of it was caused by Zeus not keeping it in his pants. Now that I got the obligatory Zeus dunk out of my system, it's fascinating because a lot of stories about heroism could be traced back to these stories, and all forms of media across the world have been informed by them in some way, shape, or form. Video games are no exception. God of War, Age of Mythology, Hades, and the predecessor of today's topic, Titan Quest, all use Greek mythology's trappings to tell different stories and offer different experiences. But we're mainly going to be talking today about Titan Quest II after it was stealth released in early access at the beginning of the month. And this is significant for a number of reasons that I'll get into in the next section. So let's just jump over there. Look, it's been a while since I've used the Pentagon Wars music, leave me alone. Anyways, the original Titan Quest was an action RPG created by Iron Lore Entertainment of Age of Empires fame and published by THQ in 2006. It focused on not only Greek mythology, but also ancient Egypt, China, and even Mesopotamia. It was a modest to decent success in an era where Blizzard was fully in their World of Warcraft bag, and neglecting Diablo like a redheaded stepchild. After some work on the final Dawn of War expansion, Soulstorm, Iron Lore shut down on February 27, 2008. THQ retained the rights to Titan Quest and then proceeded to go out of business themselves on January 23, 2013. They rose from the ashes when the rights to THQ were obtained by Nordic Games and became THQ Nordic in 2016, and this feels like it could be a whole ass video on its own. Getting back on track, one of the first things that THQ Nordic did was release Titan Quest Anniversary Edition on August 2016 as part of the game's 10th anniversary. It consisted of the original game and its expansion with a ton of quality of life updates. If you haven't played it before, I recommend it, it's a fun time. And after Anniversary Edition came out, it got 3 new expansions from 2017 to 2021 that, from what I've heard and seen on the Steam ratings, are great? Between this and the former staff of Iron Lore creating both Crate Entertainment and the critically acclaimed Grim Dawn, people were getting into full-on "are we getting a sequel" mode, which was then a reality in 2023 when the first announcement by new developer, Grimlore Games of Spellforce 3 fame, was to develop the long-anticipated Titan Quest II. That brings us up to date, and now to get into the story that's surprisingly substantial for what's in here. Titan Quest II begins with you selecting a pre-made character. There's a character creator on the way. The story is that Nemesis, the god of retribution, goes out of control so hard that she taints the threads of fate. Jump cut to 22 years later, and you see yourself being trained by your mentor, Aristano, who sounds a lot like a certain drow I used to know. From there, you get attacked by Nemesis and her undead hordes. After washing up on shore with the help of this horse charm dude, you have to make your way to the realm of the Moirai, the Fates, to learn more about your destiny and why Nemesis wants you dead. There understandably isn't much to go on story-wise in Titan Quest II at the moment. The early access release only has the first chapter in it, and it ends right as it's in the middle of the story getting good. But what it lacks in overarching plot at the moment, more than makes up for in the writing department. The dialogue and side stories in Titan Quest II at the moment are really interesting, because everything is tied to the idea of how the gods and even the way mythology works influences everything. Between Nemesis' jump scares to the dead rising from their graves, to even there being an extended bit near the end of Chapter 1 where you need to get the assistance of the wild god Pan, everything is influenced by something in the world and the people are just used to it. It's great. It also has a side effect of having side quests that tie into the events of what's happening, with the Ichthyans, a group of fishmen attacking farmers after a flood and having to help out the local militia in order to get to the realm of the Fates, because it and Pan's vineyards are along the way. That's actually really a smart way of doing it. And speaking of Pan, I kind of hope we run into other gods because he's been the highlight of Chapter 1. He carries himself with the energy of a petulant goblin, and I hope we see more petty interpretations like this. And since there's not a lot to talk about writing and story-wise, let's just jump into the gameplay because there's some good stuff in there. Quest II is, like its predecessor, an action RPG, or as I've taken to calling them in recent months, pinata simulators. The action RPG in general has been a thing since at least Zelda 2 came out in 1987, but the kind that everyone knows of in the PC space were inspired by the old roguelikes of the 80s. I have a video discussing it on the channel if you're interested, but for now let's get back to Titan Quest. Titan Quest II was released in an interesting time because when the original came out in 2006, ARPGs weren't really being looked at. It was in between Diablo 2 and Lord of Destruction being released 5 to 6 years prior, and a good 3 or so years before the release of the original Torchlight. Nowadays, we got Diablo 4 being a thing, the release of both the original Path of Exile and the current early access for Path of Exile 2, and that's not even saying anything about spiritual successor to Titan Quest Grim Dawn, the release of Diablo 3, or the Torchlight sequels, or even more out there stuff like Last Epoch or the Warhammer Fantasy and 40k inspired takes on the genre. What I'm saying is that the ARPG genre is jam-packed these days and it's hard to stand out. Titan Quest II does this by being both a refining of the original game's marquee systems, and also getting a bit more ambitious with its world and quest design. The basic mechanics are the same as they've been in the subgenre since Diablo 1 in 1996. You click on stuff to aggressively kill it, and then wear whatever armor and wield whatever weapons fall out of your recent victim's corpse. The main shakeup to this is in the mastery system. Unlike most ARPGs, which have their classes based on familiar heroic character archetypes that were established by Dungeons & Dragons and other pen and paper games, Titan Quest II doesn't have a class system in the traditional sense. It, Titan Quest I, and Grim Dawn, which was formed from the remnants of Ironlore Entertainment, all use a free-form skill system where all the skills are broken down into specific categories called masteries. These all focus on specific things, like melee combat in one grouping, fire and magic in another, ice and lightning in a third, and so on and so forth. In early access right now, there are 4 masteries to pick, choose, mix, and match from. The Warrior Barbarian Coded Warfare is very much heavy armor, heavy weapons, defensives, leaping, and health regeneration. The simply named Rogue Mastery is all subterfuge, dodging, assassination type stuff. The Earth Mastery focuses on yeeting rocks and fire at monsters, and lastly, we got the Storm Mastery. This one focuses on making your spell and ability casting better, while also beholding Satan as he fell from heaven like lightning. And also throwing ice as well, I guess. For the purpose of experimenting with the system and getting as much as I can out of it, I made 2 characters. A Warfare Rogue hybrid called the Reaver, and a Storm Rogue combo called a Stormblade. The former was because I wanted to do the whole hoplite thing of having a weapon and a shield while also jumping and shockwaving all over the place. And for the latter, I just wanted to throw out so much lightning that it would make Zeus blush. And I managed to succeed at both of those builds. Quite effectively, if I might add. And when I say that you can level up a lot of things, I mean a lot of things. You can dump your points on level up into individual skills to juice their stats, but doing so also lets you unlock modifiers that change them in small ways and massive ways. Some are just adding different modifier effects for more damage, and others basically change the properties of the abilities themselves. And this also applies to your basic attacks, dodges, and barrier skill. It's a really cool system to develop a character for, and I want to see it built on more in the early access. And it also paid off because everything was dying in droves when I fought. That is, of course, until I got to the fight with Pam. And here is where I started to have issues with the combat. Aside from the general level spike, where I was 2 to 3 levels below the boss in that instance, there were times when trying to dodge attacks where I would just not get to where I needed to in time and I just died. I hope that gets fixed. And there's also the side quests, which are called world quests. You find them by just happening upon them in the world, exploring, and it's a great source of experience and items. The standouts have to be fighting off fishmen with a ghost that you meet, and clearing out a graveyard. Lots of undead to kill in Chapter 1, interesting. And that's not even getting into being able to respec whenever you want for a fee, replayable boss fights, and more. But, for the most part, the early access of Titan Quest II is off to a good start. I need to rip the band-aid off. Titan Quest II was kind of jank at the moment. When I first loaded it up, I was getting performance issues of the it runs like a slideshow variety, and I was worried that it was going to be like this the entire time. But then I turned the settings down to high from the highest and it ran fine. But that didn't stop there being random bugs and crashes. Thankfully those are rare. While the aesthetic isn't anything to write home about, if you've seen any pop culture interpretation of ancient Greece, you'll have seen this one. I do like the individual character designs a lot. The obvious ones being Pan and Nemesis. The former looks appropriately wild with branches and shit growing out of it everywhere, and the latter looks more like a fallen angel than you would expect normally from a Greek god, which is really neat. It's also got some fitting music, nice for setting tones, but at the same time, I've largely subbed it out for the God of War 2 soundtrack, and it works surprisingly well. I hope they get the tech issues fixed, because what's here is a familiar but cool interpretation of what the first game was going for, which was a style inspired by Ray Harryhausen's stop motion. Like a lot of early access games I've covered on this channel, Titan Quest 2 has a lot going for it. And since they've had 2 hotfixes since release and an active release schedule for updates, I can't help but be interested in it. Plus, I like clicking on stuff until it dies in Greek mythology. I want to see where this goes, but at the same time, I'm content with uninstalling and waiting until 1.0 like I do with a lot of these. So I'm recommending you check this out in a year or 18 months. It's shaping up to be a good time. And that'll be it for this week's video. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, have a good weekend, and Entaro Adun!